Hey, I stream live on Twitch. You should come watch after this. Enjoy the video. Recent build crafting news calls for a renewed focus on lightfall-proof builds that aren't reliant on the soon-to-expire mod systems. And no build fits that mold better than the Stasis Hunter masterpiece I'm showing you today. It's all about utilizing a combination of 3-second cooldown Duskfield grenades and rapid-fire icy shurikens to freeze and shatter everything. And it's only going to get better in time, considering that come Lightfall, these abilities alone will be able to stun all 3 types of champions, leaving your weapon slots completely free for a loadout of your choosing, uninhibited by seasonal mod constraints. But more on how we get there at the end of the video. For now, let's talk about the core of the build and how it works. This setup begins with the Frosty's Exotic Boots, which while sprinting grant us a 100% increase to our grenade and melee recharge rate, as well as 3.5% of our class ability per second. These are basically the heart of Inmost Light for hunters, but if it activated on sprinting instead of ability usage. And considering how strong Heart is, that should give you an indication of how amazing these boots are. These pair beautifully with our Duskfield grenade, a 7-second slowing field with just a 24-second cooldown at max discipline that applies 30 stacks of slow per second, freezing enemies at 100 stacks. Given that this is the core enemy and zone control tool of this kit, having it up as much as possible is of paramount importance. We'll talk about all the ways we can refund the energy of this ability in a moment, but first it's important to touch on our other abilities, beginning with Withering Blade, our melee ability that comes with 2 charges intrinsically, ricochets twice, and applies 60 stacks of slow per hit. We also have our class ability, Gambler's Dodge, to instantly refund a charge of our melee ability when used near an enemy, and refund some of our other abilities using a few key mods that will still be around in Lightfall that we will talk about in a second. Our final ability is of course our super Silence and Squall, which is effectively a massive, roaming, damaging version of our Duskfield grenade. I've got to say though, it would definitely be fun to have some other options here. Hit that like button if you hope Bungie adds alternate Stasis supers at some point in Lightfall. Moving on, our first aspect is Touch of Winter, which along with granting 2 fragment slots, enhances our Duskfield grenade with increased size and the creation of a small stasis crystal on impact, the importance of which you'll understand when we get to our fragments. Before we get there though, we have to talk about our second aspect, Grim Harvest, which along with granting 3 fragment slots creates stasis shards when killing enemies affected by stasis effects, such as slow, freeze, and shatter. Stasis shards are an elemental well-esque type of object that refund 12 to 50% of our melee energy for small and large shards respectively when picked up, and you'll be generating them from pretty much every single enemy you kill, considering they will all be slowed or frozen from your Duskfield grenades and Withering Strikes. These stasis shards pair incredibly well with our first 2 fragments in Whisper of Conduction, which pulls stasis shards within 15 meters to you 1 second after creation, and Whisper of Rhyme, which grants 12 to 50 HP of healing, or if at max health, Overshield for small and large shards respectively. We also have Whisper of Durance, which increases the duration of our slowing effects and slowing abilities such as our Duskfield grenade from 7 seconds to 9 seconds and our Silence and Squall from 14 seconds to 16 seconds. After that is Whisper of Chains, which grants us 40% damage resistance when within 10 meters of a frozen enemy or a stasis crystal, which we of course create from our Duskfield grenade thanks to our Touch of Winter aspect. However, this stasis crystal generated from our Touch of Winter Duskfield grenade really shines with our final fragment, Whisper of Shards, which grants 500% increased grenade regeneration when shattering a stasis crystal. And I don't know if you noticed at the bottom of the screen, but together these fragments grant us a total of 50 bonus stat points, which makes it that much easier to max out our preferred stats in Resilience, followed by Discipline, Mobility, and finally Strength. Now there are 2 mods that really take this build up a notch, and don't worry, they are not going anywhere in Lightfall, because these are not your typical combat style mods that you see with most builds. They are instead basic gloves and class item mods, beginning with Impact Induction, which grants a 20% refund to our grenade when inflicting melee damage, and ending with 2 copies of Bomber, which grants us an 18% refund to our grenade when activating our class ability. And I of course have a Destiny item manager link in the description that you can use to copy all of this over to your Guardian with just a single click. And speaking of clicks, those like and subscribe buttons can optionally be given the same treatment if you're enjoying the build so far. Up to you. As for the rest of the mods, you're free to conjure up whatever works for you. I wouldn't worry too much about it though, since the combat style mods specifically are getting a massive rehaul come Lightfall, and whatever Charged with Light or Elemental Well Symphony you mix up is sure to change when the DLC drops. But Impact Induction and Bomber, those are here to stay for the long haul. But ultimately, it just goes to show you how incredible this build truly is, because all of this background footage you have been watching so far has been a modless setup with exception to those aforementioned. So just imagine how strong this build is going to get in Lightfall once the new mods release and we have time to figure out what works well with it. And I'll of course create a video detailing what mod setup is best with this build once we get there, so all the more reason to subscribe so you don't miss it. Now, before we talk about exactly how this build works, I want to rewind back to the beginning of the video where I mentioned that the abilities in this build alone can stun any type of champion in the game, allowing you to run whatever weapon loadout you please in activities like Grandmaster Nightfalls. Well, the way this is possible is thanks to the intrinsic champion stunning capabilities coming to subclasses in Lightfall. The slow debuff is being granted the capability to stun overload champions, allowing our grenade and melee abilities to completely shut them down. Additionally, shattering a frozen target is being granted the capability to stun unstoppable champions, once again allowing our grenade and melee abilities to lock them up. And although Stasis doesn't necessarily have any way to stun barrier champions, the constant freezing from our Duskfield grenades will put them in an icy prison before they can ever get their barrier shield up, which still counts as a counter in my book. So now you have a build that has you throwing grenades every 3 seconds, collecting ability energy from sprinting, melee energy and overshields from shards, damage resistance and grenade cooldown from crystal shatters, and stunning all 3 types of champions without a single champion mod. But what good is a build this magnificent if you don't know how it works? So let me give you the main things you want to be doing to get the most out of this build. First and foremost, destroying the stasis crystal generated by your grenade to activate the 500% refund from Whisper of Shards is incredibly important to spamming those snow globes as much as possible. The only situation in which you don't want to destroy this crystal immediately is when you are surrounded by enemies and need the damage resistance provided by it via Whisper of Chains. Next up, try to only use your melee ability when you are either full on both charges or when you are needing that 20% bonus grenade energy from Impact Induction, remembering to stagger the use of them due to Impact Induction's 7-second cooldown between procs. And the same goes for using your class ability in the case of needing grenade energy from Bomber or a melee charge refund from Gambler's Dodge. Other than that, this build is pretty simple to execute. Collect those stasis shards for overshield and melee energy, keep those enemies frozen for 40% damage resistance, and of course, keep on sprinting. Consider subscribing for more builds if you enjoyed the one you saw today. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, have a great day.